A lot of people were watching was supposed to be the Hunter Biden hearing yesterday, turned into the Tony Bobulinski hearing. That was okay. It's very cold today. It's, I think, the first day of spring, but it's back in the 30s. I'm kind of freezing. But I wanted to talk to everybody about some of the things that happened in that hearing. I was going to go, but it's quite time consuming and expensive. And I sort of said to myself, well, I'll get 90% of it out of watching it on C-SPAN or whatever. And then that has a tendency to kind of devolve to, well, I'll get 90% of that out of just watching the clips on the news, because I don't want to sit through a 5-hour congressional hearing. It is difficult, I think, for a lot of people to find the time to do that, particularly, if you're working a full-time job. We got a Hemi right here, I believe. Yeah. But I do recommend that people watch these hearings. I try to watch them at between 1.5 and 2x speed. Now, Charles tells me he doesn't groove like that. If he walks into the apartment and I'm listening to something at 1.5 or 2x, he can't believe that I can understand what's being said. At the same time, he could read a book in like a day, and I mean, it just takes me forever to get through a large book. It's just people's brains work differently, right? He's an expert with money and math. I don't think he could probably make a picture with Photoshop if his life depended on it. So everybody works differently, and that's part of the reason why crowdsource the truth is great. But if you have the time, I do recommend watching the hearing, because there's a lot of things that happen that don't get pulled out in the clips. And in fact, I would even suggest that the entire process has been kind of massaged over the years with the advent of television and the whole, modern Congress. I'm not saying it was invented to do this. Maybe it was. But it seems like the whole process is just a social engineering event. And the notion of putting out clips on the news, that's what they want you to be paying attention to. And just like when I have a lengthy interview with Dershowitz and he, out of hubris or stupidity or whatever, starts jawboning about Jeffrey Epstein and Bill Clinton and Linda Rothschild, and then somebody realizes, holy shit, Dersh, you shouldn't have said all that. What the hell's the matter with you? We need some sort of social engineering campaign to get people to not pay attention to the aspects of this that we don't want them to pay attention to. We got a fire here. What is going on? Oh no, it's the car wash again. I thought there was smoke coming out of there. It was mist. Why would you need to wash a cab? It looks pretty clean. Anyway, that's got to cost a mint to have a car wash right there in the middle of New York City. I think it's a good way to launder money, according to Walter White. But the social engineering in Congress yesterday was outrageous. The news today is all about AOC. She doesn't know that RICO is the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act. And what Bobulinski was trying to explain to her is that everything in there is a crime. He said there's a list of like 100 different statutes. I mean, AOC, everybody knows this part, that they're trying to get these gotcha moments. But I've prepared actually a very special overview of yesterday's hearing. So if you didn't see it, I think you're going to find this interesting. And in fact, even if you did see it, you might even find it more interesting, as I guarantee I'm going to pull out things that people weren't necessarily paying attention to. Now, we had a guy there named Lev Parnas, who they seemed kind of surprised. The Congress, the members seemed somewhat surprised that Parnas was there. And Parnas, he is a guy who's most well known for working with Rudy Giuliani. I've known about Lev Parnas for quite some time. The thing is, a lot of the stuff that I want to talk about we're going to get into things that I think are very likely to be struck. And we know that George's mentally ill brother, when he's not engaged in wife swapping, he's doing everything he can to shut down Crowdsource the Truth. So I apologize to the people who don't like the fact that I ask people to sponsor the show by going to odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth or crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com or subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. But the problem is, if I put this information on YouTube, they'll strike it, and then people don't know that Crowdsource the Truth is around, and then there's no more Crowdsource the Truth. Additionally, if there aren't sponsors of the show, I can't buy food, and I gotta find something else to do to earn money that will occupy my time and make it impossible to continue the show. So I really do appreciate folks who are sponsoring, and if you're interested in hearing this material, rather than sending me an email that says, oh, you should put information out in the open, just find $3 and sponsor on odyssey.com. It's the most economical way to sponsor the show, and it really helps quite a bit. But there was something very upsetting that happened during that hearing that just breezed by. I don't know, did people see this? There was a guy who was testifying by video conference, by Zoom or whatever, and the reprehensible Jamie Raskin, he interrupted Bobulinski, which is a tactic. Raskin, I'm pretty sure, is a lawyer, and he was questioning James Comer about, oh, we have a guy testifying on video. I thought the rules were everybody has to appear in person, and Comer pointed out that the rule states that somebody can appear by video if they have a letter from the chairman, who is Comer. Comer is great at getting Raskin to shut up. I really enjoy James Comer. And he runs that committee very, very well. Moskowitz, he's like I guarantee he was exactly that way. Like Jared Moskowitz at, let's say, 14 or 15, had to be the most annoying, want to punch him in the face, little snot-nosed asshole you could imagine. He's like, hey, Chairman Comer, why don't we just do the impeachment right now? Huh? What are you, chicken? Why don't you just do it right now? And James Comer is just sitting there like an adult, thinking to himself, I'm not going to be antagonized by a smurf. And it's also interesting to observe that Moskowitz does not wear that royal blue suit anymore that I guess earned him the Smurf moniker. But obviously James Comer is not going to submit to juvenile taunts of Jared Moskowitz and do he should have reverted to Orson Welles mode and just said, we will impeach no president before his time. Right? Wasn't that Robert Mondavi ads or something with Orson Welles? Anyway, the hearing had this guy, I think his name was Jason Galatis or I forget the guy's name exactly, but he gave some testimony. I mean, obviously the reason that he's coming from video is that he's in jail. And it was super interesting how they were like, oh, this is your best witness, a guy who's in jail. The Jasmine Crockett's and the unhinged Democrats all pointed that out. But wait, your witness has been in jail too. Lev Parnas went to jail for fraud. So that's what I was going to say, is that there's a lot of information that we're going to talk about, but I know they're going to try to strike the video if I put it on YouTube. So what we're going to do is, in just a few minutes, in just about 10 minutes, I'm going to do a walk and talk counter lawfare show. I've never tried it before. A little windy. But I have prepared. I will not be on the High Line when I'm doing the counter lawfare show, so it won't be windy like this. But I've prepared a lot of clips, and I learned a lot of things this morning. You know, after the hearing, I'll just let people know that I first heard about Lev Parnas from a Stephen Biss lawsuit. Did people know that? I don't know. I mean, I feel like maybe I've spoken about Lev Parnas a little bit, but I don't know that much about him. I mean, I was aware of him. I saw his name in that lawsuit. Then all this stuff happened where, you know, maybe it had already happened, but his rise to notoriety as a result of interacting with Rudy Giuliani, that happened after I observed him in the lawsuit. And I thought that it was this Svetlana Lakova lawsuit. Do people remember her, who she was? Let's see, I've got all these clips here. Well, first of all, here's Lev himself, right? He's swamptastic. And I mean, what the hell was he doing there? He really doesn't have that much to do with Hunter Biden. He's the swampiest guy in D.C., or at least he was yesterday. But yeah, remember, Svetlana Lakova, she's like a Russian, she's a British citizen of Russian descent. And she was an academic. She's a researcher, I think in Russian military history or espionage history, something like that. She's written some books. She's written some kind of dumb books. Like here,
the
look,
other thing that
she wrote
happened
this
with
book.
Svetlana Lakova is that she went from publishing this Spygate exposed book, which just has a remarkably similar layout to books written by morons like George Webb and his brother, where it just almost seems like it's laid out by the same person. Now, I don't know. I've never done a self-published Amazon book. Is there some template they give you that it's always the same? It seems to me they'd give you some options, and this book looks just so much like books published by George and George's brother. It makes me think that there's some person, you know, pumping them out on a template who thinks that this is the layout. But
I mean,
somehow,
that could be it. I don't know.
She goes from writing this piece of crap to getting a contract with Simon & Schuster to write this big fancy book that, I mean, look at that, 109 ratings. That's a lot. How many ratings does this have? Spygate Exposed. Probably 4 people bought this. 5. Okay. So you see, isn't that interesting?
I find it interesting.
In need of an editor. I bet you the reviews for this other book are, yeah, they all think it's fantastic.
So it's a little bit of a new format. I recorded these clips earlier, and as I walk around, I'm going to share all this information with everybody. Now, have we seen into this thing that much before? I was just telling Charles yesterday about how it's on casters and it rolls. But I don't know that we've seen into there. They had that Meghan and Harry, they had some kind of event in there. I don't know what's going on with Kate. I've been seeing a lot of stuff about Photoshop and people worried that she's dead. But back to the hearing. So isn't that interesting? Svetlana Lakova publishes that book. The first one looks a little nutty. It looks, like I said, the layout is the same as books that we've seen other people write. And I don't know. I mean, it seems like there's some kind of like grift mill pumping out books to make these like social media influencers, whether they're Svetlana Lakova or George or whoever they want you to have a book, and they want you to have, you know, you're all over the place on the podcast. And, you know, sometimes people get that sense of like, well, who is this person that's all over the place all of a sudden? Like Dylan Mulvaney, how did that person get so famous so quickly? It wasn't...
What's up, brother?
It didn't seem like... not like, you know, they start appearing on the Tonight Show as a side player and they're funny and then they build up and they get their own show. Like there's other people who are introduced in ways that at least seem maybe more organic. I've spoken about this before. It's like when they start advertising, it's your old friend Barney. And I say, wait, I don't recognize that guy. He's not my friend. See, now that that infinity display, whatever they were showing yesterday, is totally gone. Pretty good. Fast work. And here's a dog wearing a fur coat. That's funny. So, the upsetting thing that happened during the hearing that nobody is talking about, they had this guy appearing on video who Comer shoved the letter in, was it Raskin? I think it was Raskin. Comer shut him down right away. I mean, the Democrats are just so obstructionist. I appreciate having a debate with someone who has a different point of view. And I can even be moved off of a given position if I'm shown reasonable information that I might not be aware of that will help me formulate a new idea. But we're not seeing that. We're not seeing constructive debate. We just see arguing, stonewalling, obstructionism, and nonsense. I mean, AOC insisting that there's no evidence of a crime. Did people see the movie Johnny Dangerously, where he's in court and he's like, is this the gun that you used to kill everybody? And he's like, oh, where'd you get that? But that's what it was like yesterday. AOC's like, well, you have no evidence. And then Byron Donalds is like, this is a check for $40,000 from James Biden to Joe Biden. And here's a bank statement with, $100,000. It's like he had so much evidence. It was crazy. And then they just say, well, there's no evidence. And it's all been debunked. And there's no crime. RICO, racketeering, corruption, bribery, none of it is a crime. And they keep hanging their hat on this notion that because Joe Biden isn't doing a crime, or Joe Biden isn't the one smoking the crack or whatever, the point of the matter is he's quite clearly setting it up so that the money gets sent to his family so that it appears that he's not doing anything. And then you got Hunter saying he's paying $1,400 a month for Joe Biden's Raptor. But that picture we saw, Joe Biden looks like he doesn't even know where he is. And Hunter Biden looks about as excited as I would be if somebody just bought me a Raptor. So I don't think it was his. Anyway, the guy who was testifying from jail, he said some pretty stunning stuff that nobody addressed at all in that meeting. And I haven't heard anybody say anything about on the news. BlackRock. Anyway, let's listen to what he had to say. Prepare to be shocked.
During this period, the period beginning in January 2023, I was sexually assaulted by a member of the prison staff at FPC Pensacola. He persisted in sexually harassing me for many months thereafter. I had hoped to receive home confinement, which would remove me from danger. My judgment was clouded by the shame I felt for not being able to prevent the attacks. I was well aware, as inmates, all inmates are, that the Bureau of Prisons had a horrible record on these matters. I believe my disclosure would have made things worse for me. Unfortunately, the sexual harassment continued until early August, when the prison correctional officer's comments became more threatening. I feared for my safety. I decided to seek counseling from Chaplain Dixon the next day, on August 10, 2023. The chaplain was visibly upset by the events and asked to bring in Warden Salisbury, who quickly opened a PREA investigation, which is a reference to the Prison Rape Elimination Act passed by Congress. After further debriefings, I was immediately escorted to a vehicle and driven by senior staff hours to FPC Montgomery, a separate facility.
I hope people could hear that. It's a little boomy. The audio in prison could use some work. But I had to watch that again after the hearing ended because I wasn't sure that I had fully understood what was said. But he says one of the guards at the Pensacola Federal Penitentiary Center sexually assaulted him. Sounds like rape. And then he had them open a Prison Rape Act investigation. because he was afraid that saying anything about it would just get him retaliated against. And after the prison guard raped him, he then was sexually harassing him, which I would imagine, you know, referencing back to the assault and threatening to do it again. The guy sounded like he was going to cry, which is understandable. I mean, an adult man recounting his own rape and the shame that he says he felt at not being able to stop it. I mean, that's horrendous. But you see, this seems to be the way the Department of Justice operates, right? You get jammed up on some kind of crime. And by the way, what is this guy doing in some kind of hardened prison facility? He's like an accountant or something. And I mean, does he deserve to be raped? I don't think anybody does. Certainly no one does. It's horrible torture. But why couldn't a guy like that be locked in his house with an ankle bracelet? Go to the parole agent once a week or something like that. Wouldn't it save money? Why does he need to be in jail? And what happened to this prison guard who raped him? Why doesn't Congress immediately say, wait, what? Who did that? Go over to Pensacola, find that guard. I mean, the whole thing speaks to, do they want to stop something like that? Because you see, what happens if you're friends with Hunter Biden and he entices you to do something that you know is illegal, but he says, hey, look, you know, the FBI or whoever is protecting Joe Biden right now has said, go do this. So don't worry, you're safe. Or what if you're Felix Sater or you're Lev Parnas and they say, hey, we're going to sign this cooperation agreement and we're going to give you permission to do all this stuff, break the law. You know, we want you to catch criminals. So you're going to start some kind of business, get people involved in money laundering. Or what about Cameron Ortis? Right? That was the FBI and the RCMP. They tell him, okay, we want to catch all these criminals. You work for the RCMP, so what we want you to do, Ortis, is go and try and get these criminals to use our Phantom Secure Blackberries. And Cameron Ortis says, okay, I'm working for the RCMP undercover, I'm gonna go do all this stuff. And next thing he knows, he gets arrested and they say, oh, you're giving information to criminals. And Ortis, or this guy who's getting raped in jail, or whoever the target of this operation would be, says, well, wait a minute, you told me to do that illegal thing. And they just say, well, what? And they lock you in jail. Then when you're in jail in January 2023, like that guy was talking about, and people like James Comer or whoever start talking about how, hey, we got whistleblowers and people who are gonna spill the beans here on Joe Biden, how do we know somebody doesn't make a phone call to that prison guard? Who's more dangerous here? Those two or the guys on the sidewalk? How do we know somebody doesn't make a call to the prison guard and say, hey, by the way, there's somebody in there who needs the treatment? And they might not want that prison guard to be punished for what he's done because maybe they have a need in an ongoing way for psychotic, sociopathic rapists and other types of mentally ill schizophrenic maniacs who derive pleasure from torturing people because they're miserable and themselves deserve the death penalty. Certainly that guy who's raping and torturing people in jail, I think that should be considered. Do they give the death penalty for rape? They must somewhere. But anyway, there's a huge amount of information that I'm going to go into right now on a very special on the street counter lawfare episode. I've never done this before, but I did prepare quite extensively. Oh, look, what is this? There's a foosball game inside here. That's a detailed one. Look at the arms move and everything. Fancy. That's weird. What is... See, this is a crappy area. We're kind of near my old office. It looks like there's a lot of construction going on. But anyway, I'm about to switch over here to odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth. That's the most economical way to access the sponsor-exclusive content and to support the show. Also, even if you just subscribe to Odyssey for free, it's become the largest repository of Crowdsource the Truth legacy content. So it's a great way to stay up on past shows. So you can also join on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com and subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Stay with me. I'm going to resume in just 5 minutes. There's a lot to talk about. You're going to be shocked.